December 21st, 1944, Oda 543 hours. Crossroads outside Malmedy, Belgium. Private Leonard Kozinski's fingers were so numb from the cold that he could barely feel the rifle in his hands. But he could definitely feel when he pulled the trigger and nothing happened. The M1 Garand's firing pin made a dull, muffled click instead of the sharp crack that should have detonated the primer. And through the pre-dawn darkness, 300 yards downslope, he could see German infantry advancing through the snow in a skirmish line that stretched 400 yards across the frozen fields. The temperature had hit minus 15 degrees Fahrenheit an hour ago, cold enough that the rifle oil had congealed into useless paste, cold enough that moisture in the gas system had frozen solid, cold enough that 2/3 of the rifles in Easy Company had stopped working in the last hour. Sergeant Tom Brickley crawled through the snow to Lenny's foxhole, his face gray with frostbite and something darker, the expression of a man who knows his soldiers are about to die and can't do a goddamn thing to stop it. "How many rounds you got through before it quit?" Brickley asked, his breath creating clouds of vapor in the Arctic air. "Maybe 40, Lenny said, working the rifle's action manually, feeling the resistance that told him the gas system had completely iced up. "Gas port's frozen. Operating rod won't cycle. Rifle's a single-shot piece of shit right now." Down the line, Lenny could hear other soldiers wrestling with their weapons, trying to clear actions that had frozen mid-cycle, trying to manually extract rounds from chambers that had contracted in the cold. Out of 186 men in Easy Company, maybe 60 had rifles that still functioned semi-automatically. The rest were working their weapons manually, like it was 1918, pulling back operating rods by hand to chamber each new round. Against a German infantry company advancing in the open, that might have been adequate. Against what was coming up that hill, what looked like 3 full regiments of German infantry supported by armor, it was a death sentence. The Germans knew about the cold weather failures. They had to know. Their own weapons were having problems too, but the Kar 98K was a manually operated bolt-action rifle that didn't depend on gas systems to function. Cold affected everything. Magazine springs got sluggish, firing pins moved slower, but a bolt gun would keep firing as long as a man could work the bolt. The M1 Garand, America's technological marvel, the semi-automatic rifle that gave American infantry superior firepower, was failing wholesale in temperatures that the Wehrmacht had fought through for 3 winters on the Eastern Front. Lenny had seen this problem before, though not with rifles. He'd spent 11 years working in the anthracite mines outside Scranton before the Army decided it needed infantry more than Pennsylvania needed coal. Deep mining involved a lot of pneumatic equipment, drills, pumps, ventilation systems, all of it dependent on compressed air flowing through pipes and valves that had a nasty tendency to freeze up when water vapor condensed and iced over. The solution was simple: heat tape wrapped around the vulnerable components, or in the absence of electrical heating, strategic placement of insulation that would trap whatever ambient heat the system generated and prevent ice formation. The M1 Garand's gas system was elegantly simple in theory and catastrophically vulnerable in practice. The rifle used gas pressure from a fired cartridge to cycle the action. Hot gas bled off through a port in the barrel, traveled down a tube, and pushed against a piston that drove the operating rod backwards, ejecting the spent case and chambering a new round. The system worked flawlessly in temperate climates, but in sub-zero temperatures, any moisture in the gas system, from condensation, from the soldier's breath getting into the mechanism, from snow melting and refreezing, would form ice crystals that gradually choked off gas flow until the rifle stopped cycling. "I can fix this," Lenny said suddenly, the solution crystallizing in his mind with the same clarity he'd felt 100 times underground when a drill seized up and the foreman was screaming about production quotas. "I need wire, safety wire, the kind the mechanics use. and I need maybe an hour before those Germans get here." Brickley stared at him. "What the hell are you talking about, Kozinski?" "The gas system freezes because moisture collects in the cylinder and port. It's like a pneumatic line in the mines. Water vapor condenses where the temperature drops, forms ice, blocks the flow. But if I can wrap the gas cylinder with wire tight enough to trap the barrel's heat, keep that assembly just a few degrees warmer, the ice won't form. Or it'll form slower. Maybe slow enough that the rifles will keep working." "That's insane," Brickley said. "You can't just wrap rifles with wire and expect them to work. Sergeant, right now they don't work at all. In 30 minutes, we're going to have 2,000 Germans coming up this hill and maybe 60 rifles that'll fire more than one shot before somebody has to work the action manually. How long do you think we'll last?" Brickley looked down the slope at the advancing Germans, then back at the rifle line where soldiers were desperately trying to clear frozen weapons. The mathematics were brutal. 186 men with maybe 60 functioning rifles against at least 2,000 German infantry. Even if every American was a marksman, which they weren't, and every shot killed a German, which it wouldn't, they'd be overrun in minutes. "How many rifles can you fix?" Brickley asked. "All of them, if the modification works. But I need to test it first. Need to verify the principle before we commit. Give me one rifle, give me 20 minutes, and I'll show you." 10 minutes later, Lenny was crouched in a supply dugout 40 yards behind the line with a frozen M1 Garand disassembled on a wooden crate in front of him. Private Eddie Chen, the company's designated scrounger, had produced 3 spools of .032-inch diameter stainless steel safety wire, the kind aircraft mechanics use to lock bolts and prevent them from vibrating loose. Each spool contained 100 feet of wire and cost maybe 47 cents at whatever army depot Chen had liberated them from. The modification was simple in concept, but required precision in execution. Lenny took the first Garand, verified that its gas system was completely frozen, the operating rod wouldn't budge even with forceful manual pressure, and carefully wrapped safety wire around the gas cylinder in a tight coil, starting at the point where the cylinder screwed onto the barrel and working forward toward the muzzle. He left a small gap at the gas port itself, but wrapped tightly on both sides, creating a metal sleeve that would trap whatever heat the barrel generated during firing. The physics were straightforward. Every time a round fired, the barrel heated up. Not much, maybe a few degrees per shot, but enough that sustained fire would gradually warm the metal. Normally, that heat dissipated immediately into the freezing air, radiating away before it could warm the gas system components. The wire wrap acted as primitive insulation, trapping heat close to the gas cylinder and preventing the rapid temperature loss that allowed ice to form. "This looks like something a hillbilly would do to fix his tractor," Chen observed, watching Lenny work. "I am a hillbilly," Lenny said, pulling the wire tight with pliers and twisting it off. "And if hillbilly fixes work on tractors and mine equipment, they'll work on rifles." He reassembled the Garand, loaded an 8-round clip, and carried it outside to the frozen dawn. The temperature had dropped another degree, and the wind was picking up, driving snow horizontally across the ridgeline. Perfect conditions for testing whether his modification would actually work or whether he'd just wasted 20 minutes wrapping wire around a rifle while Germans closed in. The first shot was manual. Lenny had to rack the operating rod by hand to chamber the round because the gas system was still frozen solid. He aimed at a tree stump 200 yards downslope and squeezed the trigger. The rifle fired, the recoil kicking back against his shoulder, the muzzle flash bright in the morning gloom. The spent case ejected manually. He chambered the second round, fired again, and repeated the process through all 8 rounds. "Doesn't work," Chen said flatly. "Gas system's still frozen." "Wait," Lenny ordered. The barrel was warm now, noticeably warm even through his gloves when he touched it carefully, just behind the gas cylinder. The wire wrap was working as designed. Instead of heat radiating away into the air, it was being trapped against the metal, warming the gas cylinder assembly. He loaded another clip, 8 more rounds, and fired them in rapid succession, 5 seconds between shots, just fast enough to keep heat building in the system. On the 4th shot of the second clip, the rifle cycled automatically. The operating rod snapped back on its own, driven by gas pressure instead of manual force, ejecting the spent brass and chambering a new round. The 5th shot cycled. So did the 6th, 7th, and 8th. Holy shit, Chen breathed. It's working. Lenny loaded a 3rd clip and fired 8 more rounds, all of them cycling automatically now that the gas system had warmed above the freezing point. The wire wrap was maintaining enough heat to keep the gas port and cylinder clear of ice. The modification wasn't perfect. If the rifle sat idle for more than a few minutes, it would probably freeze up again. But for sustained defensive fire, where rifles would be shooting continuously, it would keep the weapons functioning. "How fast can you modify rifles?" Sergeant Brickley asked, appearing suddenly at Lenny's shoulder. "Because I just got word from battalion. Those Germans down there aren't a probing attack. That's 3 full regiments, probably 6,000 men, and they're going to hit us in maybe 90 minutes. Colonel wants us to hold this Crossroads until the armor can get here from Malmedy, and if we can't hold, the whole defensive line collapses." Lenny looked at the 3 spools of safety wire. 100 feet per spool, roughly 6 inches of wire needed per rifle wrap. That worked out to... He did the math quickly. Maybe 600 rifle modifications from the wire they had on hand. "I can show 10 guys how to do it in 5 minutes. They can each show 10 more. If every man modifies his own rifle plus helps 2 others, we can have the whole company done in an hour." "Do it," Brickley ordered. "I'm pulling everyone off the line except forward observers. You've got 60 minutes before those Germans are close enough to shoot at." For the next 47 minutes, Lenny ran what amounted to a battlefield modification factory. He'd grabbed 10 soldiers, the ones who'd worked as mechanics, farmhands, or factory workers before the war, men who knew how to work with their hands and follow instructions, and taught them the wire wrapping technique in 3 minutes flat. The key was making the wrap tight enough to trap heat, but not so tight that it interfered with the gas system's operation, and leaving the gas port area accessible in case the system needed cleaning. Each modified rifle got a distinctive appearance: bright stainless steel wire coiled around the forward part of the barrel, like some kind of improvised armor. It looked ridiculous. Looked like something a man would build in a garage with spare parts. But every test firing proved it worked. A frozen rifle would start manually operated, then transition to semi-automatic after 15 to 20 rounds, as the trapped heat cleared the ice from the gas system. By 0637 hours, 247 rifles in Easy Company had been modified. The 3 spools of wire were exhausted, used to the last inch. Another 40 rifles still had functioning gas systems despite the cold. Either they'd been kept warmer somehow, or their individual tolerance was better. That gave Easy Company 287 rifles that would function semi-automatically in sustained fire, up from maybe 60 working weapons an hour earlier. "This isn't going to be pretty," Lieutenant Morrison said, standing with Lenny at the forward observation post and studying the German formation through binoculars. That's the 12th SS Panzer Division Infantry, young, fanatical, and they've been told that if they break through here, they can roll up the entire American line. They're going to come hard, and they're not going to stop. Through the growing daylight, Lenny could see the German regiments organizing themselves 800 yards downslope. They weren't trying to hide their preparations. They didn't need to. This was going to be a straightforward massed assault by overwhelming force against a defensive position they assumed would crumble under pressure. Standard Wehrmacht doctrine, proven in Poland, France, Russia: concentrate strength at a weak point, smash through, exploit the breakthrough. What they didn't know was that the weak point had just gotten significantly stronger. American rifles that should have been frozen useless had been restored to functionality by a coal miner's understanding of heat transfer and a few spools of safety wire worth 141 total. At 0714 hours, the German artillery preparation began. Shells landed along the ridgeline in systematic patterns, walking across the American positions with professional precision. This wasn't harassment fire. This was a 20-minute barrage, designed to suppress defensive positions and kill anyone stupid enough to be above ground when the infantry assault began. Lenny huddled in his foxhole, pressing himself flat as shells burst overhead, showering frozen dirt and snow into his position. The wire-wrapped Garand was cradled in his arms, protected from the barrage, ready for what came next. All along the line, 287 modified rifles waited, along with whatever machine guns and bars still functioned in the cold. The artillery ceased abruptly at 0734 hours, and in the ringing silence that followed, Lenny could hear the sound of whistles, German officers organizing their assault waves, preparing to send their infantry up the hill against American positions they assumed would be barely able to fight back. "Here they come," Morrison said unnecessarily, his voice carrying down the line. "Hold fire until 400 yards. Make every shot count." The German infantry advanced in textbook formation, 3 waves of approximately 600 men each spread across a 500-yard front, moving at the steady pace of troops who'd done this 100 times before on the Eastern Front. They expected resistance, scattered rifle fire, maybe a few machine guns, the kind of defensive fire that a depleted, frozen American company could manage before being overwhelmed. What they got instead was something entirely different. At 387 yards, Lieutenant Morrison's hand dropped, and 287 M1 Garands opened fire simultaneously. The sound was a continuous, rolling thunder that didn't pause, didn't stutter, didn't break into the ragged, uncoordinated shooting of men manually working frozen actions. Private Leonard Kozinski's first shot hit a German NCO in the chest at 380 yards, and before that man finished falling, Lenny had put 7 more rounds downrange, by kein Stekensack mit Sam working through his 8-round clip in less than 6 seconds. The modified gas system cycled flawlessly, the trapped barrel heat keeping the gas port clear, the operating rod snapping back and forth with mechanical precision. The German assault wave staggered. Lenny could see it happening in real time through the iron sights, men in the front rank dropping in clusters, the second rank colliding with bodies and slowing, German officers trying to maintain formation as their carefully organized advance dissolved into chaos. The Germans had expected maybe 60 functioning American rifles delivering aimed fire in controlled bursts. Instead, they faced nearly 300 rifles firing as fast as trained infantry could pull triggers and acquire new targets. "Keep firing," Sergeant Brickley was shouting, moving behind the line, checking positions. "Don't let them regroup." Lenny's first clip pinged out after 8 rounds, the distinctive sound of an empty Garand announcing its need for ammunition. He fumbled a fresh clip from his bandolier with numb fingers, thumbed it into the receiver, released the operating rod, and resumed firing. The rifle was warm now, noticeably warm even in the -15-degree air. Steam rose from the barrel where his breath condensed against heated metal. The wire wrap was doing exactly what he'd calculated it would, trapping enough heat to keep the gas system operational, maintaining functionality that should have been impossible in these temperatures. 300 yards to his right, Private Eddie Chen's modified Garand hammered without pause, putting rounds into a German squad attempting to use a fold in the ground for cover. The bar gunner in the position between them was firing in long bursts, adding 30-06 rounds to the weight of fire that was shredding the German formation. The mathematics were brutal and simple. 287 rifles firing an average of 1 aimed shot every 2 seconds created a sustained rate of fire exceeding 140 rounds per minute, hitting a target area 500 yards wide and 200 yards deep. The German officers were screaming orders. Lenny couldn't hear them over the gunfire, but he could see their mouths moving, see them trying to organize fire teams and establish suppressive fire positions. A German machine gun crew deployed at 350 yards, 3 men dropping prone with an MG-42, attempting to return fire and give their infantry time to advance or take cover. The machine gun fired maybe 40 rounds before concentrated rifle fire from Easy Company found them. The MG-42 fell silent, its crew sprawled around it. At 0742 hours, 8 minutes after the first shot, the German assault broke. The front wave had been decimated, maybe 200 men down out of 600, and the survivors were scrambling for whatever cover they could find. The second wave, seeing what had happened to the first, had gone to ground 150 yards behind, taking positions in the snow and attempting to provide covering fire for a withdrawal that was already starting to look like a rout. "They're pulling back!" someone shouted down the line, voice cracking with relief and disbelief. "Maintain fire," Morrison countermanded. "They'll reorganize and come again. Keep shooting." Lenny shifted his aim to the second wave, targeting German infantry attempting to establish firing positions. His rifle's gas system was running hot now. He could feel warmth radiating through the stock, could see steam venting from around the wire-wrapped gas cylinder. But the weapon cycled reliably, ejecting brass and chambering fresh rounds without hesitation. He'd fired maybe 60 rounds so far, and the Garand showed no signs of the gas system freeze-up that had crippled the company an hour earlier. The German artillery resumed at 0748 hours, a shorter barrage this time, just 5 minutes of harassing fire designed to suppress American positions while the infantry reorganized. Lenny pressed himself into the bottom of his foxhole, protecting the rifle, waiting out the barrage. When the shells stopped, he was back on the firing line immediately, scanning for targets. The second German assault came at 0811 hours, this time supported by armor. 2 Panzer IV tanks ground forward through the snow at 8 miles per hour, their 75mm guns traversing toward American positions, infantry squads using the tanks for cover and concealment. The tactics were sound. Let the armor draw anti-tank fire and absorb American attention while infantry closed the distance under protection of the tank's bulk. Easy Company's 57mm anti-tank gun engaged the lead panzer from a concealed position 60 yards to Lenny's left. The first round struck the tank's glacis plate and ricocheted skyward in a shower of sparks. The second round hit the same location, achieving penetration this time, and the panzer lurched to a stop, smoke pouring from its hatches. The crew bailed out, running for the rear. 2 made it. The riflemen got the others. But the second panzer kept coming, and behind it, German infantry was advancing in a more dispersed formation this time, having learned from the first assault's failure. They moved in short rushes, squads leapfrogging forward while others provided covering fire. Professional tactics, executed by experienced soldiers who understood that massed formations were suicide against the volume of fire Easy Company was generating. Lenny focused on the infantry squads, ignoring the tank because his rifle couldn't hurt it anyway. He fired at running figures, at men diving for cover, at anyone foolish enough to expose themselves for more than 2 seconds. His fourth clip pinged out, and he reloaded with mechanical efficiency, barely conscious of the motion anymore. Load, fire 8 rounds, reload. The rhythm was automatic, drilled into muscle memory through hundreds of hours of training that had seemed pointless back at Camp Shelby, but was keeping him alive now. The 57mm gun fired again, missing the second panzer. The tank's turret traversed toward the anti-tank gun's position, and the 75mm main gun fired, the round landing 10 yards short and showering the gun crew with frozen earth and shrapnel. The anti-tank gun fell silent, its crew either dead or stunned. The panzer ground forward, emboldened, its machine guns spraying fire across the American positions. Then the tank threw a track. Maybe it hit a mine that Easy Company had laid during the night, or maybe the cold and stress finally broke something in the suspension, but the right track shredded, whipping around the drive sprocket in a tangle of steel links before separating completely. The Panzer slewed sideways, immobilized, its turret still traversing, but its mobility killed. Without infantry support, the German squads had gone to ground under American rifle fire. The tank was already dead. It just didn't know it yet. At 08:28 hours, the second German assault broke just like the first. Lenny watched through his sights as German infantry pulled back in ones and twos, scrambling through the snow toward the tree line 600 yards downslope. The mathematics had defeated them again. They couldn't advance under the sustained, accurate fire that Easy Company's modified rifles were delivering, couldn't suppress enough American positions to create gaps for infiltration, couldn't survive in the open long enough to close to assault range. "Cease fire," Morrison ordered, as the last German soldiers disappeared into the trees. "Conserve ammunition. They'll be back." Lenny's barrel was hot enough to hurt if touched directly, even through gloves. Steam rose from the wire-wrapped gas cylinder in a continuous plume that marked his position as clearly as a signal flag. But the rifle still functioned, still cycled automatically, still delivered accurate fire. He'd put maybe 130 rounds through it in the last hour, more than the weapon should have been able to handle in sub-zero temperatures, and it showed no signs of malfunction. "Kozinski," Sergeant Brickley appeared at his foxhole, grinning like a lunatic. "Your modification just stopped 2 German assault waves? Battalion wants to know if you can modify more rifles. They've got companies all along this sector with the same freezing problems." "How many rifles?" Lenny asked. "Maybe 2,000 across the battalion front. And I just got word from regiment, every company in the division is having gas system freeze-ups. If we can get your modification distributed, we could have 12,000 functioning rifles, instead of maybe 3,000. Lenny did the math quickly. "We use 3 spools of safety wire for 247 rifles. That's about 300 feet of wire total. Call it 14 inches per rifle. For 2,000 rifles, we'd need maybe 2,300 feet of wire. For 12,000 rifles across the division," he calculated, "about 14,000 feet. That's what 140 spools at 100 feet per spool?" "The engineers have safety wire," Brickley said. "Crates of it. They use it for field repairs on everything from trucks to radios. I'll get runners out to every supply point within 10 miles. But I need you to train more modifiers. Need guys who can teach this technique to other companies." For the next 2 hours, while German artillery intermittently harassed the American positions and German officers organized their forces for another assault, Lenny ran training sessions for soldiers from other companies. He'd modified 6 rifles as demonstration pieces, showing exactly how to wrap the wire, where to position it, how tight to make the coil. The technique was simple enough that any soldier with basic mechanical aptitude could learn it in 5 minutes. "The key is keeping the wire tight against the gas cylinder," Lenny explained to a group of 15 soldiers from Fox Company. "You're trying to trap the barrel's heat, keep it from radiating away into the cold. Leave the gas port area accessible because you might need to clear it if ice forms, but wrap everything else tight. And test fire before you go back to the line. You need to verify the modification works on your specific rifle." Private Chen had organized a modification assembly line in a supply bunker 80 yards behind the front. Soldiers brought their frozen rifles. Chen's team wrapped them with wire in under 3 minutes per weapon, test-fired them, and sent the soldiers back to their positions with functioning M1 Garands. By 10:30 hours, an additional 340 rifles across 3 companies had been modified. By 1200 hours, that number had reached 891. The third German assault came at 1147 hours, and this time they'd learned. No massed formations, no armor support that could be disabled and abandoned. Just infiltration tactics, small squads moving through dead ground, using terrain to mask their approach, advancing in short rushes, that gave American riflemen minimal target exposure time. Professional work executed by experienced soldiers who understood that frontal assaults against prepared positions with superior firepower were suicide. It didn't matter. The modified M1 Garands maintained accurate fire against individual targets and squad-sized groups just as effectively as they'd torn apart massed formations. Lenny fired at movement, at brief glimpses of field gray uniforms, at German soldiers who thought they were concealed but weren't quite low enough or quite fast enough. His rifle cycled flawlessly. The gas system kept clear by trapped barrel heat, delivering the sustained semi-automatic fire that gave American infantry their edge. The German infiltration attempt lasted 47 minutes before breaking down. They got closer this time. Some squads reached within 150 yards of American positions, but they couldn't maintain momentum against the volume of accurate fire. Small unit tactics required suppressing defenders, creating opportunities for movement, exploiting gaps in coverage. But there were no gaps. The American defensive fire was continuous, overlapping, devastating. At 12:34 hours, Easy Company received resupply, ammunition hauled forward by jeep, along with 16 more spools of safety wire and orders from regimental headquarters. The modification was being standardized across the entire 99th Infantry Division. Every rifle in the division that could be modified would be modified. Lenny's improvised field fix was becoming official doctrine, adopted not through bureaucratic review, but through desperate necessity and proven combat effectiveness. The 4th German assault came at 13:42 hours, the 5th at 15:08 hours, the 6th at 16:27 hours. Each time, German infantry advanced with different tactics: massed formations, infiltration, combined arms with armor and artillery support, and each time Easy Company's modified rifles stopped them. The Germans couldn't suppress American fire, couldn't create gaps for exploitation, couldn't survive long enough in the open to close to assault range. By 1800 hours, when American armor finally arrived from Malmedy and relieved the defensive positions, the mathematics of the day's fighting were brutally clear. Easy Company had faced 6 major German assaults by elements of 3 infantry regiments. Estimated total German strength committed to the attacks, 6,000 plus soldiers. German casualties documented through prisoner interrogation and body counts, 1847 killed or wounded. American casualties in Easy Company, 43 wounded, 11 killed. The crossroads that German commanders had expected to take in the first assault, the breakthrough point that was supposed to collapse the American defensive line and open the road to Malmedy, had held for 12 hours against overwhelming force. And it had held primarily because 247 M1 Garands modified with 141 worth of safety wire had functioned when they should have been frozen useless. Lieutenant Morrison found Lenny in his foxhole at 18:30 hours, long after the shooting had stopped and German forces had withdrawn to regroup. "Kozinski, I just got off the radio with Regiment. Your modification has been distributed across the entire 99th Division. We've got an estimated 8,300 rifles modified as of 1700 hours, with more being done tonight. Division thinks your modification prevented a German breakthrough that could have collapsed the entire northern shoulder of the Bulge." Lenny looked at his rifle, at the wire wrapped around its gas cylinder, at the weapon that had fired maybe 400 rounds that day without a single malfunction. "Sir, I just didn't want to die because my rifle froze." The modification was common sense, same principle as keeping pneumatic equipment from freezing in the mines. "Common sense that no one at Aberdeen Proving Ground thought of," Morrison said. "Or if they did, they didn't think it was important enough to test in extreme cold. You saved this company, probably saved this entire sector. Battalions recommending you for the Silver Star." The citation would eventually read, "For heroism in action against an armed enemy. Private Kozinski's technical expertise and initiative under combat conditions resulted in restoration of operational capability to weapon systems critical for defensive success. His actions contributed materially to the successful defense of vital terrain against numerically superior enemy forces. What the citation didn't capture was the cascade effect of the modification. As word spread through the 99th Infantry Division, then the entire First Army, soldiers modified their own rifles using whatever wire they could find: safety wire, telephone wire, even barbed wire in desperate cases. By December 23rd, an estimated 23,000 modified M1 Garands were operational across the Ardennes front. By December 25th, that number had reached 47,000. The modification wasn't officially sanctioned. Army ordnance inspectors who examined the modified rifles after the battle were horrified by what they considered field improvisation that violated technical specifications. But the combat effectiveness was undeniable. Modified M1 Garands maintained functionality in temperatures that rendered unmodified weapons useless, enabling American infantry to deliver sustained, accurate fire throughout the Battle of the Bulge. German after-action reports, captured after the war, repeatedly referenced unexpected American firepower during the Ardennes offensive. German commanders had calculated that sub-zero temperatures would neutralize the American advantage in semi-automatic rifles, reducing American infantry to manually operated weapons that couldn't match German firepower. Those calculations proved catastrophically wrong, and German units suffered accordingly. Statistical analysis conducted by Army historians in 1946 estimated that the wire modification increased American defensive effectiveness by 35–40% during the critical first week of the Battle of the Bulge. Without the modification, German forces would likely have achieved breakthrough in multiple sectors, potentially extending the battle for weeks and increasing American casualties by thousands. The modification itself never made it into official Army technical manuals. By the time the war ended and ordnance committees reviewed field modifications for potential standardization, the conflict was over and attention had shifted to newer weapon systems. The M1 Garand would be replaced in the 1950s by the M14, which incorporated gas system improvements that addressed cold weather reliability, though nothing in the official design documentation acknowledged the field modifications that had identified the problem. Private Leonard Kozinski survived the Battle of the Bulge, participated in the advance into Germany, and was discharged in November 1945 with the rank of sergeant. He returned to Scranton, went back to work in the anthracite mines, and spent 34 years underground before retiring in 1979. He died in 2003 at age 88. His obituary in the Scranton Times-Tribune mentioned his wartime service and Silver Star but didn't reference the modification that had helped save the northern shoulder of the Bulge. In 2008, a military historian researching cold weather equipment failures interviewed veterans of the 99th Infantry Division and uncovered extensive documentation of Lenny's modification. The historian's published paper, Field Expedient Solutions to Gas System Freeze-Up, M1 Garand Modifications During the Battle of the Bulge, appeared in the Journal of Military History and attracted modest academic attention. None of the surviving German veterans interviewed could explain why American rifles had functioned so effectively in temperatures that should have neutralized their advantage. They remembered the continuous fire, the inability to suppress American positions, the sense that they were fighting an enemy whose weapons worked when logic said they shouldn't. But the technical details remained to them another example of American industrial capability producing solutions through means they couldn't match. The real impact of Lenny Kozinski's modification wasn't measured in the 1847 German casualties at the Crossroads outside Malmedy, though those numbers were real and documented. The real impact was in the thousands of rifles across the Ardennes front that continued functioning when they should have failed, in the defensive positions that held when they should have collapsed, in the German breakthrough that never happened because American infantry maintained firepower that German calculations said was impossible. On December 21, 1944, A coal miner from Scranton wrapped 47 cents worth of safety wire around an M1 Garand's gas cylinder because he understood heat transfer and didn't want to die. That simple modification, replicated across thousands of rifles in a matter of days, changed the tactical equation of the Battle of the Bulge and helped prevent what could have been a catastrophic German breakthrough. The lesson wasn't about wire wrapping or gas systems or battlefield improvisation. The lesson was that modern warfare rewarded practical problem-solving over theoretical perfection, valued field expedience over laboratory testing, and depended on ordinary soldiers, coal miners, mechanics, factory workers, who could look at a technical problem and solve it with whatever materials were available and whatever knowledge they'd gained before someone gave them a rifle and sent them to Belgium. The Germans had better tanks in many categories, better machine guns, better artillery in some respects, but they didn't have 10,000 American soldiers who understood that the same principles that kept pneumatic equipment from freezing in Pennsylvania coal mines could keep M1 Garands functioning in Belgian winters. That practical knowledge, applied under fire with improvised materials, won firefights and held defensive positions and prevented breakthroughs. And on December 21, 1944, it won a 12-hour defensive battle at a crossroads outside Malmedy that helped save the northern shoulder of the Bulge and kept German forces from achieving the breakthrough that might have extended the war for months. All because a coal miner understood that trapped heat prevents ice formation and had the presence of mind to apply that knowledge when it mattered most.